Following up the Infinity Saga was always going to be a tall order. How do you convince people there's more to the story after that?
Iron Man.
Phase 4 of the MCU took some bold risks to prove there was life in the franchise, and I think that the future of the franchise looks promising. So let's look at the two biggest changes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in this phase. The first of which was the integration of Disney+.
With Disney+, we're able to extend this way of storytelling to a new format, creating series that are connected to our theatrical releases, making the MCU more immersive than ever.
Clearly, Marvel Studios has gotten a lot of mileage out of their movies, destroying the box office year after year. Has become routine for this franchise. But there are tons of stories in the comics that just can't be told in 2.5 hours, nor can you realistically do it through a series of movies. Marvel Studios has always known that they need a home on the small screen where they can tell these longer and bigger stories. However, their attempts to do so on Disney's TV networks only yielded one success: Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They fared a lot better on Netflix until the flops of Defenders and Iron Fist, and that even had them in a situation where they lost access to those characters. That's like Marvel's biggest fear. The creation of Disney Plus obviously presented an opportunity on two fronts. For Marvel, they could now tell their TV-sized stories on home turf, so to speak. And for Disney at large, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was the best selling point they could have for their streamer. So it was that Phase 4 saw Marvel expand in a pretty major way onto the small screen. Their D+ shows featured actual Avengers-grade characters, and they came packed with production levels matching their movies. You'd think that this is a Marvel fan's dream come true. But it turned out that there was a backlash against the shows. There were many criticisms of the Disney Plus expansion, some of which are legit and others aren't. Among the legit complaints is that even for a Marvel fan, there's a point where it gets to be too much. Thanks to the combo of shows and movies, we pretty much had a new Marvel release every month. And since the shows were typically 6 episodes long, you'd have a Marvel thing going for a whole month. Many diehards were starting to feel exhausted and wanted the shows to stop. Another serious issue was that, well, between the shows and the movies, Marvel's resources were being stretched. On screens, both big and small, fans observed that the CGI wasn't as quite up to snuff, and there were compromises in the writing and editing departments. Even outside the studio, Marvel had been putting a lot of pressure on the Hollywood VFX industry. Those pressures may well lead to labor reform in the industry. That sounds like a good thing, but forcing the industry and the government to act like this is inhumane. Of course, I have to bring up the backlash caused by Mrs. Marvel, and She-Hulk specifically. Disney Plus did kinda expose all the dark corners of the Marvel fanbase, where the racists and misogynists reside. But I'm not going to give those folks too much time in my day. Instead, I'm going to move on to another big change in the franchise this phase, which was the wider selection of genres. People have long complained about the so-called Marvel formula, and not without reason. While some of the movies in the Infinity Years stood out, they were all structurally similar. You had a hero who either needed an origin story or got it in the previous movie. There'd be a villain threatening at least the country, if not the world or the universe. The hero would then have to punch the villain in the face until they stopped. In contrast to that, Phase 4 had some really weird and experimental projects. The first of these was WandaVision, which started off as an homage to sitcoms over the years. Then it slowly came out that Wanda was the villain all along. Similarly, She-Hulk was a slice-of-life legal drama, with only the barest hint of an overarching story. The show told smaller stories about legal issues that you'd face in a world of superheroes. On the big screen, Shang-Chi was a martial arts movie that focused on Chinese mythology, while Eternals was a giant epic that explored a mystery across space and time. Some of these shows and movies were good, and, well, some weren't. But the one thing you couldn't say is that they were formulaic. That sort of diversity and experimentation is key to keeping the franchise fresh. But this turned out to be another point of contention among fans. See, the whole reason that there was a Marvel formula in the first place is because the formula worked. Correction, it worked, and it made a boatload of money, and it kept fans happy. At some point, as a fan of a franchise, you turn up for movie after movie because you know what you want from it. And while most of the cinematic experiments worked in Phase 4, the TV experiments were more hit and miss. On the movie side of things, the worst received projects were, in fact, the most formulaic ones. Thor: Love and Thunder, and to a lesser extent, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness were as traditional as they come. The former wound up being one of the most disliked projects of the franchise. The latter didn't get the usual amount of Marvel love either. But as far as the experiments went, it was Eternals that bounced off everyone the hardest. It went way too far afield from what Marvel fans want from this franchise. Overall, though, the movies did pretty well. But signing into Disney Plus, there was more controversy. There were people who had genuinely good reasons for hating She-Hulk. The show ultimately felt too inconsequential and unnecessary to the franchise as a whole. On paper, there's nothing wrong with a show that doesn't have a franchise-wide consequence. But this is where the expectations come in. This is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, dang it. Wong's cameo in the show is supposed to directly factor into Doctor Strange 3. Despite the complaints against these changes, I don't think Marvel should stop. If anything, the complaints are kind of a good thing. For starters, Marvel can tweak and tune their strategy based on fan feedback. Rumor has it that Marvel Studios are reconsidering the direction they're going with the rest of the multiverse saga. That's great, and they need more of that kind of feedback. At the same time, though, all that sound and fury shows that people are passionate about the MCU. People are noticing the potential that the MCU still has. And they're pushing Marvel to take the final steps to realize it. And Marvel Studios, for their part, are hearing us out. Lots of people thought that we'd never be invested in this franchise again after the ending we got with Endgame. But the movies and shows are still doing numbers, and people are still on board. I don't think that'd be the case if Marvel was just giving us more of the same. Like, say what you will about Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Black Widow, but if everything in Phase 4 was like that, I doubt it would stick. With Quantumania on the way, I'm genuinely excited to see how Marvel messes with my expectations this time. And I'll be looking forward to every other Marvel project for precisely the same reason. What do you guys think? Do you think Phase 4 is taking the franchise in a good direction? Or is it time to get back to the drawing board? Bye for now!